Breaker of this world's chain, we adore thee, whom all men love. Spotless, taking man's form, O purifier, thou art above the gunas three. Knowledge divine, not flesh, thou whom the cosmos wears, a diamond at its heart. Let us look deep in thine eyes. They are bright with the wisdom of God, that can wake us from Maya's spell. Let us hold fast to thy feet, treading the waves of the world to safety. O drunk with love, God drunken lover, in thee all paths of all yogas meet. Lord of the worlds, thou art ours, who wert born a child of our time, easy of access to us. O merciful, if we take any hold upon God in our prayer, it is by thy grace alone, since all thine austerities were practiced for our sake. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Perfect, whom lust could not taint, nor passion nor gold draw near. O Master of all renounce, fill our hearts full of love for thee. Thou hast finished with fear and with doubt, standing firm in the vision of God, refuge to all who have cast fame, fortune, and friends away. Without question thou shelterest us, and the world's great sea in its wrath seems shrunk to the puddle that fills the hoofprint in the clay. Speech cannot hold thee, nor mind, yet without thee we think not, nor speak. Love, who art partial to none, we are equal before thy sight. Taker away of our pain, we salute thee, though we are
स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Good evening. Today we're celebrating the birthday of Swami Niranjananandaji Maharaj, one of the great monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. He was born in 1862. The exact date of his birth is not known, actually. They say probably in August, but we don't know. In Kolkata, or just near Kolkata, a few miles from Kolkata. In his teenage years, something that's striking about him compared to other future monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna is that his first interest in spirituality came through spiritualism, which was very popular in the West, in the US especially. When Swamiji came in the 1890s, he found a lot of spiritualist movements, seances, mediums, stuff that Swamiji would often make fun of. He didn't disbelieve in the stuff, but he felt that if you want to actually make progress in spiritual life, spiritualism is kind of a distraction and a danger. But Niranjanananda, whose pre-monastic name was Nitya Niranjan Ghosh, so Nitya Niranjan, and Sri Ramakrishna would refer to him as Niranjan. Niranjan, in his teen years, was a kind of spiritualist. He was living with his uncle, Pirichand Mitra, and this Pirichand Mitra was a big spiritualist and was the leader of a group. And so Niranjan joined the group. He was intrigued, and he served as their medium, psychic medium, communicating with dead spirits and so on and so forth. Ouija, maybe. I don't know the exact details of what kind of stuff they did. But it's kind of interesting. And there's an incident. He developed siddhis, psychic powers, to cure illnesses. And there was a wealthy man of Kolkata who was suffering from insomnia for many, many years, 18 years of insomnia. So that person heard that Niranjan had these occult powers. So he came to him and said, please help me. You've got to help. Nothing is working. And Niranjan Maharaj, he was very compassionate. He wasn't Maharaj at the time. Anyway, Niranjan. He was very compassionate, and he said, all right. And he worked his occult spiritualist magic and cured him. And then later he said, Niranjan said, finding the man suffering so much, in spite of all of his riches and wealth, I was seized with the feeling of the emptiness of all worldly things. So you can already see here that he wasn't just a kind of amateur spiritualist, but he had much deeper spiritual leanings and longings, which would come out once in a while, but which were ultimately triggered by Sri Ramakrishna. So this spiritualist group, led by his uncle Pirichand, they heard about Sri Ramakrishna, supposed to be a great saint, and they were a little skeptical, and they said, let's test him, because we've mesmerized. This is mesmerized in the sense of mesmerism, which is another form of spiritualism, kind of hypnotism. They said, they're very good at hypnotizing people, so they said, if this guy's a real saint, then even in spite of our best efforts, we won't be able to put him under. So let's test him. So they went to Dakshineshwar as a group. Niranjan was in that group of spiritualists with his uncle. And they tested him. And he kind of humored them. Sri Ramakrishna humored them to teach them a lesson. And they tried their best to mesmerize him, to hypnotize him, but without avail. And in the end, his uncle, Pirichand, admitted to Sri Ramakrishna, you're too much for us. You have a very strong mind, and please forgive us. So Niranjan was kind of impressed with that. And these are the exact words. Sir, you are a great soul with a strong mind. We are incapable of mesmerizing you. And then Sri Ramakrishna got up and said privately to Niranjan, because he singled him out, he said, come here often. So he picked him out. In fact, right on noticing him, he classified him as an Ishvara Koti. Sri Ramakrishna identified very few of his disciples as Ishvara Kotis, as these divinely commissioned souls. What exactly is an Ishvara Koti? Fortunately, Sri Ramakrishna gave a pretty precise definition in the Kathamrita, in the Gospel, in one place, as far as I can tell. He says, Ishvara Kotis are avatars and amshas of an avatara. So either an incarnation of God or a person who is a portion of an incarnation of God. So these are obviously these are not just realized souls, these are highly elevated spiritual personages who they don't even come to earth because of their own karma. They come to serve humanity and to help humanity out of their ignorance. And Sri Ramakrishna, in fact, said that in a vision, he saw the luminous form of Niranjan playing with a bow and arrows. And he later said that Niranjan was born as a partial incarnation of Rama, of Ramachandra, the incarnation. And Sri Ramakrishna was obviously he was not too happy with Niranjan's spiritualist interests. And so he, in a very gentle way, he kind of moved him away from his spiritualist interests. And Niranjan himself describes this really extraordinary experience of initiation. Sri Ramakrishna was not an ordinary guru, of course, and so instead of just giving a mantra verbally, sometimes he would write a mantra on the person's tongue. Sometimes he just touch the person and initiate the person. So this is Niranjan himself explaining his own initiation experience. He says, I was then working in an office. One day, I went to visit Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar. he wrote a mantram on my tongue and asked me to repeat it. What an experience. After returning home, even when my eyes were closed, I began to see innumerable fireflies in my room. The mantram was vibrating in my head and in every limb of my body. I wanted to sleep, but I could not stop the repetition of japam. I had previously been unaware of this phenomenon. I became scared and thought that I would go out of my mind. After 3 days, I returned to Dakshineshwar and said to the master, "Sir, what have you done to me?" After listening to my story, he laughed and withdrew the power of the mantram. He then said, "It is called ajapa japam, which means the repetition of japam effortlessly and unceasingly. It just goes on constantly." And there's actually an interesting slight variation on the same incident narrated by Adbhutanandaji, another great monastic disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He says the following. He says, "One day the master touched Brother Niranjan, and for 3 days and 3 nights, Niranjan did not get one wink of sleep. He had the continuous vision of a mysterious light and kept repeating the Lord's name. His tongue could not stop saying japam for 3 days. Prior to meeting the master, Niranjan was employed by spiritualists as a medium for contacting spirits. So one day, the master humorously said, 'Now, my boy, another ghost, the Holy Ghost, is upon you. However much you try, you will not be able to dismiss him.'" So Sri Ramakrishna replaced the ghost that he was communing with as a spiritualist with the Holy Ghost, who is God himself or herself. Niranjan had many wonderful qualities. He was extremely generous, extremely compassionate, very strong-willed, and had a very strong mind, and was deeply committed to truthfulness as well. There's Sri Ramakrishna, as obviously Jagat Guru, as a great guru, he taught his disciples differently depending on their temperament, their personality, their strengths, their weaknesses. And so on one occasion, with regard to Yoganandaji, who was a very mild-mannered disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Yogananda was with some company, and these people were criticizing his guru, Sri Ramakrishna. And Yogananda felt, let them talk about, who cares? It doesn't affect him in any way, so let them talk. And when Sri Ramakrishna found out about it, he was upset with Yogananda and scolded him and said, "You should have defended your guru against these false, these accusations." Exactly the opposite happened in the case of Niranjan. Niranjan is on a boat traveling to Dakshineshwar to visit Sri Ramakrishna, and on a ferry. And some people started criticizing Sri Ramakrishna, saying that he was not a real renunciate, he was a hypocrite, he enjoyed good food and every comfort, and his disciples were gullible schoolboys. Niranjan was not pleased with any of this. He first started arguing with them and saying, you guys are wrong for these reasons, but they still wouldn't listen. So he became furious and started rocking the boat and threatening to capsize it. And he's a very strong person, excellent swimmer, so he could easily have made it to safety, but they would have drowned. Sri Ramakrishna heard about this later and was very unhappy and scolded him severely. And he said, "Anger is a deadly sin. You ought never to let it carry you away. The seeming anger of a good man is something different. It's no more than a mark made on water. It vanishes as soon as it's made. As for those mean-minded people who talked against me, they weren't worth getting into a quarrel with. You could waste your whole life in such quarreling. Think of them as being no more than insects. Be indifferent to what they say. See what a great crime you are about to commit under the influence of this anger. Think of the poor helmsman and the oarsman in that boat. You were ready to drown them too, and they had done nothing. They would actually have been killed." Niranjan had an ailing mother, and out of concern for his mother, and with the desire to serve his mother, he took up a job about 100 miles from Kolkata, so very far away. He wouldn't be able to visit Sri Ramakrishna nearly as frequently. He was in Murshidabad, working for an indigo planter in a plantation. Sri Ramakrishna, when he first heard about it, was completely stunned and disappointed. And he said, "I would not have been more pained had I heard of his death." He was that upset about it. Then he found out that it was really for his aging mother, an ailing mother. And so he then said, then it is all right. It won't contaminate your mind. But I tell you, if you had done so for your own sake, I could not have touched you. And he said, really, it was unthinkable that you would stoop to so much humiliation. Didn't I know that my Niranjan had not the least trace of impurity in him? Somebody who overheard Sri Ramakrishna saying this was a bit troubled, who was a householder, obviously had a salaried job to support his wife and children. So he says, sir, you are condemning service, but how can we maintain our families without earning money? And then Sri Ramakrishna replies, let him who likes do so. I don't forbid everyone. I say this only to these young aspirants, pointing to Niranjan and others who form a class by themselves. So he had already earmarked Niranjan as a future monastic, as a renunciate, and so he's giving much more stringent, strict instructions, more rigorous spiritual instructions to Niranjan than to others. Sri Ramakrishna would often praise Niranjan as being absolutely guileless. This is one of the things that he found most striking about Niranjan. And he would point out, one cannot be guileless without a great deal of spiritual discipline in previous births. A hypocritical and calculating mind can never attain God. There's another incident. This is actually recorded in the Gospel. He's chanting, Sri Ramakrishna is chanting many names of God, Govinda, and so on. And then suddenly he says, Alek Niranjana, which is another name of God. And then he said, suddenly he started weeping and he said, Niranjana, O Niranjan, my child, come, eat this, take this. When shall I make my life blessed by feeding you? You have assumed this human form for my sake. He's addressing Niranjan, God, the God. Niranjan, the future monastic, was not there at the time. He was in his job in the indigo plantation. But there seems to have been some kind of mystical communication. Sri Ramakrishna seems to have been directly addressing him, and Niranjan seems to have heard, because shortly thereafter he resigned from his job. And then he came back to visit Sri Ramakrishna. And in a state of ecstasy, Sri Ramakrishna told Niranjan, you are living in an indigo house of such a place. On this particular day, you rode on your deputy's horse. You stood in such a place with the bow and arrow. So Niranjan was firmly convinced then that Sri Ramakrishna was actually omniscient, that he knew exactly what he was doing, even though it was 100 miles away. With tears in his eyes, Niranjan then surrendered to Sri Ramakrishna, saying, Sir, all these days I could not recognize you. And from that day forward, he would visit Sri Ramakrishna regularly, completely gave up his spiritualist pursuits. Sri Ramakrishna, obviously, we all know that toward the end of his life, he became very ill with throat cancer, and he was shifted to several places. But in 1885, he was in Shampukur in Kolkata, in a house, receiving treatment. Niranjan, because he had such a strong constitution, he served as Sri Ramakrishna's gatekeeper. And there are a number of interesting incidents, but I'll mention one. This is regarding an actress named Binodini. Actresses at the time were considered to be not pure and not upstanding citizens. Typically, there was a kind of social stigma around actresses. And Sri Ramakrishna in 1884, he went to see Girish Ghosh's play, Chaitanya Leela, a play on Chaitanya, and the person playing Chaitanya was Binodini, a great actress. And he was very pleased with her acting, and he blessed her on that occasion. And she was entranced when she met Sri Ramakrishna, and she wanted to see him again. But she also knew that there were very strict rules about who can visit and who can't visit Sri Ramakrishna, because he was very ill. So she came up with an interesting idea. She didn't come up with the idea. Kalipada Ghosh, another householder disciple of Sri Ramakrishna's, came up with this idea. He said, I've got an idea. Because she's a very good actress. He said, dress up like a European gentleman, and I'll bring you to Sri Ramakrishna, and they'll let you in. And so she dressed up, speaking like a man, and they came to the entrance, And Niranjan, not realizing that she was Binodini, but that he thought it was a European gentleman led by Kalibodha Ghosh, so he let them in. And then the moment they walked into Sri Ramakrishna's room, she took off her the gentleman clothes, and Sri Ramakrishna was just laughing and thought it was really funny and appreciated her devotion. And so instead of getting upset, he was actually very pleased. And Niranjan also, his heart also kind of melted. Our tradition doesn't emphasize miracles much, but there's one incident that at least has a strong sense of a miracle. What happened, it involved Niranjan and some of his brother disciples. They're young. They're these young men, and in India, if you live there, you'll see that people, especially in the right season, like people will climb up on mango trees and get mangoes. And so there's a nice, juicy-looking date palm, and they wanted juice from that date palm in the garden in Shampukur. And so they went as a group. Sri Ramakrishna had no idea. Well, he wasn't informed about their outing, rather. And suddenly, Holy Mother sees Sri Ramakrishna, who can barely even move because of his throat cancer, run toward them, run down the stairs and run toward them. And she's completely stunned, of course. She says, she thought, how is it possible? How can one who needs help even to change his position in bed run like an arrow? And then she went to Sri Ramakrishna's room, not there, even more puzzled and distraught. Finally, she went back to her room completely confused. And then she saw Sri Ramakrishna running back to his room. So she's really just completely floored. And then later she confronted him about it, and he said, "Oh, you noticed that? You see, the boys who have come here are all young. They were proceeding merrily to drink the juice of a date palm in the garden. I saw a black cobra there," so all obviously mystically, psychically. "It is so ferocious, and it might have bitten them all. The boys did not know this. So I went there by a different route to drive it away. I told the snake, 'Don't enter here again.' The master asked her not to divulge this account to others." Okay. Later, toward the end of Sri Ramakrishna's life in the human body, the elder Gopal, who later became Advaitanandaji, he purchased 12 pieces of ochre cloth and 12 rosary beads, rosary necklaces. And Sri Ramakrishna gave one set of ochre cloths and rosary beads to Niranjan, marking him as one of his future monastic disciples. And he, in a sense, initiated him in the sannyasa. There's an incident also relating to Sri Ramakrishna's passing. Sri Ramakrishna left his body on 16th August, 1886, and they cremated his body. And so the question is what to do with the ashes. They first brought them to the garden house in Kashipur, but they didn't have money. And so Ramchandra Datta, who was a wealthy doctor and a relative of Narans, the future Swami Vivekananda, he said, "Hey, how about this? I've got this great place, Kankurgachi, Jugodan. Let's put it there." And Niranjan was not at all pleased with this proposal. And so he and Shashi, the future Swami Ramakrishnanandaji, and a couple others, they secretly took the lion's share of the relics, of the ashes, and put them in a separate urn and secretly kept them in Balaram Bose's house, a trusted friend, devotee friend of theirs. And then Swamiji later took that large portion of relics and on his own head took them to Belur Math. And so if you visit Belur Math now, it's so spiritually charged in part because of those relics, which were secretly taken from the urn. So we should be grateful to Niranjan and his group for having done that. Swamiji, after Sri Ramakrishna's passing, Swamiji himself gave Niranjan the name Swami Niranjanananda. There's a touching incident when Niranjan, after having taken sannyasa, he's walking on the street and he purchased some sweets to offer to Sri Ramakrishna. And on his way back, there's a very poor mother carrying a little boy in her arms. And the boy sees those sweets and says, "I want those sweets." And Niranjan heard and immediately went to the young boy, said, "Take these sweets." very kindly, please eat these sweets. And this poor mother understood that this is a monk carrying food for God, to be offered to God. And she said, Father, no, you are carrying these sweets for the Lord. It would be inauspicious if my son were to eat them. He said, no, mother, it would be all right. His eating would be the same as the Lord's eating. And so he insisted on giving that packet to the boy. And he went back to the same market, bought fresh sweets, and then offered them to Sri Ramakrishna. But you could see how big his heart was. He had leanings toward austerity and wandering. He wanted to wander. And so he wandered for a number of years, starting in November 1889. And he visited many different temples. Lord Shiva temple at Deoghar. He went to Varanasi. He went to Allahabad, Sri Lanka. And Swamiji at that point, in 1894, he heard about his visit to Sri Lanka and says, why doesn't Niranjan learn Pali in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and study Buddhist scriptures? I cannot make out what good will come of aimless rambling. So Swamiji wanted to put him to work instead of having him wander here and there. And he wandered until about 1895. And after Swamiji came back from his first trip to the West, they actually met up on several occasions. And Niranjan met him again in various places, like in Almora, after Swamiji's second visit to the West. Swami Achalanandaji, he made a number of really, I think, revealing notes about, he wrote some notes about some of the most unique qualities of Swami Niranjananandaji. So I wanted to share some of those. He wrote these notes on 18th December 1946. The reason why I'm reading Achalanandaji's notes is because Niranjanandaji himself didn't write any kind of autobiography. He also didn't write any reminiscences. So this is from Achalanandaji's notes. Swami Niranjanananda believed that Sri Ramakrishna was the infinite God incarnated in human form. And he who took refuge in him would not have to worry in his life. And these notes continue. I'm skipping some of them, but he says, Achalanandaji says, Swami Niranjanandaji had a similarly high estimation of Holy Mother, Sharada Devi. He believed that by the grace of the Mother, he could do anything. He believed one should sincerely serve the Master, thinking of him as a living, conscious being, our very own. This is the supreme worship. The Swami did not put too much stress on rituals and mantras. He had tremendous faith in the doctrine of service as established by Swami Vivekananda, and he encouraged people to serve human beings as manifestations of God. He was extremely generous. Without any misgivings, he would take care of anyone who asked help from him. And one of my favorites, he used to do physical exercise regularly, and he encouraged the young men to keep their bodies strong and active. Niranjanandaji was extraordinarily devoted to Holy Mother, and Swamiji knew that. And he used to say, Niranjan has a militant disposition. So he would often get into conflicts with his brother monks. Niranjan has a militant disposition, but he has great devotion for Mother. So I can easily put up with all his vagaries because they really appreciated his love for Mother. They'll overlook everything because he loved Mother so much. And in fact, it was because Niranjan was so devoted to Holy Mother that other people started to recognize her greatness, including Girish Ghosh, who was initially skeptical of her greatness. Toward the end of his life, he practiced tremendous austerities, and his health started to fail. And so in the last couple of years of his life, he moved to Haridwar, which has a much cooler climate than Belur Math, because he was suffering from dysentery at the time. And before he left for Haridwar, he visited Holy Mother. It was an extremely emotional time for him. He knew in his heart of hearts he would never see Holy Mother again. And so he was weeping. But before he expressed his emotions, he told Mother, he said, again and again, you have to serve me, Mother. You please feed me. With her own hands, she fed him, she served him, and he was insisting on it, like a little boy. And she agreed. She understood also. And before leaving, he fell at her feet and burst into tears. Then he silently went away, knowing that he would never see her again. At Haridwar, he lived in a rented house. He was alone. He had an attendant for some time. And at the very end of his life, he was stricken with cholera. And he knew it was his end. And so he was on the banks of the Ganges, and he was immersed in meditation, thinking of Sri Ramakrishna. And there was an attendant who was offering to serve him. He said, "Let me help you." Niranjan finally said, "Don't you want me to die in peace?" And so the attendant left reluctantly. And Niranjananandaji left his body in Samadhi on 9th May 1904. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.